Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to this NEXUS Gains Talk happening today, which is happening right on the heels of World Food Day, which was on the 16th of October. And under the same theme, water is life and water is food. And I'm sure no one needs to stress or re-emphasize the significance and centrality of water in terms of sustaining food systems and also ensuring the sustainability of food systems under climate change. And all of us would be aware of the current strains in terms of increasing water scarcity, threats to water security, both from a quantity and quality perspective, which pose significant threats to food production, availability, and security. And dealing with these complex issues requires systematic approaches that cut across different scales and across sectors. And today we are convening this discussion facilitated by NEXUS Gains to look at it from a water, energy, food nexus perspective and gain more insights in terms of how can NEXUS approaches be deployed to support the transformation of food systems in different areas. We've got an exciting lineup of speakers who are joining us from different places and also with very different expertise who will be talking to us today. And after that, we also have two very exciting and very experienced panelists who are going to reflect on what our speakers would have said and also share their thoughts and opinions. And we'll then round up with a quick question and answer section. So if you've got any questions as our speakers are going through their presentations, please post them in the Q&A platform, and we'll definitely put the questions to either the speakers or the panelists. We'll try to go through as many questions as we can in the Q&A session, and where we cannot, we'll definitely make follow-ups through email to provide those answers and maybe link you with some of the researchers who can answer you. So without haste, I would like to bring the first speaker, who is Professor Bruce Lankford. Bruce is an Emeritus Professor of Water and Irrigation Policy at the School of Global Development at the University of East Anglia. He has 40 years of experience in agriculture. That's quite impressive. Irrigation and water resources management, mainly acquired in sub-Saharan Africa. His interests cover irrigation policy, serious games, irrigation design, water conservation, and irrigation efficiency, as well as water allocation. And Bruce is going to be our first speaker today, and he'll share with us some of his experiences relative to the topic of the day. Bruce, you can go ahead.
Can you see? Thank you, Tafadzwa. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can. You can proceed.
Great. I'm going to dive straight into this. In celestial mechanics, a 3 or 4 body problem. Sorry, I'm just going to minimize. Sorry, I can't minimize the, anyway. Okay. Sorry, in celestial mechanics, the 3 or 4 body problem presents fiendishly difficult mathematics, meaning the motion of 3 or 4 planets, moons, and spacecraft cannot easily be resolved. Likewise, applying irrigation efficiency to resolve 4 goals, reducing depletion, not cutting crop production, not increasing energy use, and enhancing water equity, is mathematically complicated due to the high number of system factors which are uncontrolled, not mentioned, or not managed. So if we apply irrigation efficiency in isolation, we may raise water consumption, which can add crop biomass but change crops. We can increase energy use, and we can sharpen inequality. Instead, to achieve desirable goals, I believe we need to govern irrigation efficiency and its interconnected system factors and drivers that affect multi-scale irrigated systems and catchments. Now, mathematically, as many of you will be familiar, it's a very simple ratio of crop beneficial consumption to withdrawals or BC beneficial consumption to irrigation depletion. It's at the center of contradictions, which I think contribute to the four-body problem of something difficult to resolve. For example, an increased irrigation efficiency occurs if we increase the proportion of BC relative to water withdrawals, or decrease withdrawals relative to BC, or convert non-recovered water and non-beneficial consumption to greater BC and or lower withdrawals. It's also at the center of very complicated distinctions between real water savings and paper water savings, the first being about depletion and the last being about either field level applications or withdrawals. IE is indirectly mediated via changes to irrigation technology and practices, meaning we cannot bear down on it directly, and we have to go via indirect methods. It's very difficult to measure across field, system, and basin scales. And when we raise irrigation efficiency and conserve water, this redistributes water in what I call a para-commons, which is a commons of salvaged water, and it asks who gets the material gains of an efficiency gains. So to my mind, irrigation efficiency is an interconnector between water actors and para-commoners. Now, if we present my four-body problem gravitating around this problem, the central problem of raising irrigation efficiency, for example, we may end up with more water consumption when we raise irrigation efficiency, which enables powerful irrigation actors to gain yet more water. It might mean we move to row crops, risking broadacre field crops, and it might mean that we increase our energy consumption. Or alternatively, we might end up only, for example, resolving two of those problems. We reduce water consumption, we improve equity between water sectors, but we erode food production and we increase energy consumption. The other difficulty we have with irrigation efficiency is its sort of political economy. In other words, changes to or more irrigation infrastructure, for example, area, intakes, canals, pumps, boreholes, storage, and so on and so forth, all harness, store, withdraw, and distribute more water. All of these can help drive up consumption. And this is in response to subsidies and a sort of political economy of a rural constituency that also is wrapped up in a state and non-state narratives regarding the need to modernize our agriculture. These results in this switch to, for example, drip can result in greater carbon emissions if we're using fossil fuel, for example, switching from gravity to drip. That can increase CO2 emissions. Drip also suits water-rich commercial growers. And I point you to the photograph in the top right-hand corner of table grapes in Jordan, but not so suitable for smallholders and public irrigation systems, because this brings social costs to farmer groups who are trying to operate and maintain expensive and complicated pressurized systems. But the real thorny question at the center of resolving the four-body problem of irrigation efficiency is, can we cut aggregate depletion in catchments for reallocation to other sectors without cutting crop production? And I believe we can. These photographs capture, the two on the left capture the water-rich top-enders in southern Tanzania who grow 2 to 4 tons of rice using about 2.5 meters depth of water at the field scale level, compared to only about 6 kilometers away, water-short tail-ender rice nurseries and rice growers who use about less than a meter of water to grow about the same tonnage. Now, higher irrigation efficiency raises crop productivity as long as we can control water within irrigation. And this occurs, for example, because we put a greater percentage of withdrawn water to crop BC and growth. Irrigation efficiency, when we raise it, improves water timing and scheduling between farmers. It improves water uniformity between and within fields and farms. And it enables agronomic practices such as deficit irrigation, fertilizer dosing, and management of soil salts. But now look at this photograph, these sets of photographs. If we reduce field level applications by 1.5 meters, the real question is, where do we and how can we redirect that saving? Now notice this is a paper saving, but it is nonetheless real water, and controlling this delta is the route to real savings. A comprehensive water framework accounting method, I think, is central to governing IE. And I've, in various publications this year, have developed 2 such water accounting frameworks. And they build on the original water accounting method developed by Williardson. The differences is that I account for catchment supplies and water allocations, not just the water that's withdrawn. I also identify 3 irrigation zones: primary, expansion, and reuse, not just 2 zones, which I think most people seem to be concentrating on, which in other words is primary and reuse. I connect the withdrawals to the changing net and gross irrigation requirement, which in turn determines the expansion of the primary zone. I also distinguish between unused and reused recovered fractions, and I then am able to compute the distribution of water to the different zones. And then I can generate total metrics for the system, including the all-important change in aggregate depletion. Now, using this framework, and I point you to the slides at the end of the presentation in my appendix, or also to my own website, I can derive a paradoxical increase in aggregate depletion. I do this because I can continue the same withdrawal as the baseline. I use a higher irrigation efficiency in the primary zone. This induces an expansion zone and a total primary zone and expansion zone beneficial consumption. The reuse zone decreases in area and beneficial consumption. This delivers higher aggregate depletion and reduced flows for society and nature. And I hope we're all familiar with that paradoxical rebound. But you can also use the same methodology to induce a real water savings. And to do this, I then reduce the withdrawal to match the lower gross irrigation requirement. This enables a larger primary starter area, but does not give an expansion area. This also reduces the rezone area, the reuse area. This gives a lower aggregate depletion, but the same total zone irrigation BC. Now, that's the Pareto neutral outcome that we're seeking, the same total zone beneficial consumption. And this particular version increases flows for society and nature. The other thing that I pointed to in an earlier slide is the need to manage real water flows. In a chapter that has been written with Matthew McCartney, due out in a book edited by Jerry Knox, we develop a 6-part framework that concentrates on real irrigation systems and real flows. Those 6 parts is the need to sustain crop production, which is, of course, what we're all seeking. And then this realization that when we make savings at the field level, we've got to figure out where that goes. So we've got to think about the sort of tertiary and secondary and main canal systems that constitute irrigation systems. That then means we can translate withdrawals into consumption-based savings for nature. And then we can think about some cross-cutting issues. And I'm sorry, I don't have time to go into these. You're very welcome to look at the chapter when it comes out. Those are the cross-cutting dimensions. And then we very necessary to account for the final outcomes in terms of allocations, water consumption, total crop production. And the last part is this decision is whether we make savings at the field scale and pass them up to the intake, or whether we force and cascade savings through the system because we've reduced the intake flows and volumes. So to conclude, flourishing frugal irrigation benefits crop production, water reallocation, energy and emissions, and water livelihoods and equity. To control the rebounds, gains, and costs from raising irrigation efficiency requires us to govern IE and its associated factors. I'm sure we all agree this is not an easy task. Resolving the 4-body problem of IE means we need to better manage real water on thousands, if not millions of hectares of gravity surface irrigation. And this in turn requires much better and more empirical research of irrigation at all scales. And yet I point out many times that in the past 20 to 25 years, we've now lost all our master's degrees in irrigation across the world. With these lacks, I question whether we're putting our faith solely in models or too few single-scale water management tools, for example, satellites, soil sensors, and social data. So on the contrary, governing irrigation and efficiency needs a comprehensive approach across different scales, disciplines, and actors, using a variety of quantitative and social and digital tools, whilst bearing down on the political economy of IE and water extraction. One final coda is that I strongly believe that when we start to conserve water, that this is a democratic process which is built on scenarios of possible futures. And this requires discussions including all voices, not just sort of well-known experts, we especially should be interested in what tail-end irrigators are able to do with their irrigation practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bruce, for that captivating presentation. I, for one, certainly enjoyed reading the papers that you published this year. I found them very thought-provoking, discipline shifting in terms of challenging the status quo in terms of our knowledge. And I would encourage others to read them. If you don't mind, Bruce, you can maybe share the links via chat so that people can also see those papers. Now, we move on to our next speaker, who is here with us, Sanju Koirala, coming from the International Water Management Institute, who's going to be talking to us today about gender, water and gender, which is another very important subject area. Now, a little bit about Sanju. Sanju works as a national researcher focusing on social science, water and natural resources at the International Water Management Institute in Nepal. She has been working on research projects on NEXUS Gains, sustainable intensification of mixed farming system, and addressing climate vulnerability in Nepal through resilient, inclusive wash systems. She holds a PhD in human geography from the University of Otago, New Zealand, and some of her publications include Exploring Migration and Disaster Nexus, and looking at the impacts of the delay in construction of large-scale hydropower projects on potential displaces. Thank you very much, Sanju, for agreeing to participate in today's talk, and I hand over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Tafabza. Today I'm here to present on gender dynamics in irrigation, making way for women leaders in Western Terai, Nepal. Women produce between 60 and
Sanju?
80%.
Sorry to disturb. Can you put your presentation in presentation mode?
Okay. Okay, thank you, Tafabza, again. Let me go into the presentation. Women produce between 60 and 80% of the food in most developing countries and are responsible for half of the world food production. Their roles in irrigation, food production, and their contribution to household food security have only been recently recognized. In Nepal, male farmers' interest in non-agriculture sector and migration is increasing. Women and elderly individuals are left behind, becoming key actors in water resource management, agriculture production, and food security. Nepal, and particularly rural Nepal, is steeped into patriarchal norms and rigid hierarchies that affect access and control of resources. Women and disadvantaged groups such as Dalit, Janajatis, and Madhesis face many structural barriers and constraints to access development opportunities. This study was commissioned as a part of CGIAR initiative on NEXUS Gains Work Package 2 on water productivity to understand the holistic assessment of barriers and challenges to effective irrigation water management in Nepal. And this study in particular is a part of that larger study carried, and it focuses on gender barriers to hold leadership position in water user association. The research is based on the 10 FGDs and 6 official in meetings conducted with relevant stakeholders in Kanchanpur, Kailali, and Bardia district located in Western Terai of Nepal. The objective of the study are to identify the barrier preventing women farmers from being recognized and heard on a par with men in the management of local water resources. The other objective is to make recommendation to enable women farmers to lead water user association in the future. This is the picture of the study area. The study, as you can see, the study area lies in western part of Nepal and in 3 districts, namely Kanchanpur, Kailali, Bardia. Farmers members and representatives of Water Users Association and concerned government officials of 3 irrigation schemes from Mahakali Irrigation Project, Rani Jamara Kuleria Irrigation Project, and Bava Irrigation Project were consulted for this study. In all 3 irrigation schemes, there are different types of Water Users Association with interconnected responsibilities. And here is the picture of the study area. As you can see in the picture, you can see that the participation of women is comparatively less than the male. Now let me go into the findings. Let me start with the positive changes. Women increasingly irrigate farms and maintain irrigation system. For many women, accessing surface water irrigation has brought about some positive changes. Let me share with you the narrative of a woman from Jamara Water User Association. With irrigation access, we produce more crops, including vegetables, and generate income by selling them, which helps us support our families. Increased production brought a positive impact for household food and nutrition security. This is shared by one of the members. The income generation from selling crops and vegetables by female farmers has also led to a positive change in attitudes towards daughter and daughter-in-law. In many instances, they were allowed to participate in collectives, which they were not that much allowed earlier. Women members of the Water User Association have also frequently qualified for subsidized diesel or electric pumps, despite land ownership certificates being in their husband's name. Small-scale irrigation technologies has also reduced the drudgery of some women farmers. These are some of the positive changes, and there are lots of struggles that women farmers have to face. Let me share with you some. Technical and institutional barriers still prevent many women farmers from accessing information, subsidies, and facilities in the study area. Landless farmers and women from migrant households are unable to present their husband land ownership certificate, are deprived of benefits. In addition, the distribution of solar irrigation pumps was inequitable. Most of the solar irrigation pumps were received by well-networked women whose husband or some relatives are in higher position or are the member of Water User Association. Women's absence in irrigation management. The government of Nepal is committed to gender equality, meaningful participation of women and gender-responsive governance. Yet, the situation on the ground is not so positive. For example, we observe gender inequality in the recruitment of staff in irrigation programs. We found out that out of 16 field technicians in the management office of Mahakali Irrigation Project, only 2 were women. And in Rani Jamara Kuleria Irrigation Project, only 3 women technicians had been appointed. The women farmers stated that it would be easier for them to communicate their problems to female technicians and were disappointed that so few were available. And due to this, they were quite hesitant to contact the male technicians when required. In all the Water Users Association visited, men occupied leadership position in advisory committee. Women were chosen as a member and treasurers. Further, fewer Dalit occupied such position. Some female members of the executive committee for the Rani Kulo Water Users Association said that even if women aspire to hold leadership position, they are discouraged. One of the women member from Rani Kulo Water Users Association said that compared to the past, women participate in meeting and give application for irrigation services. But when a committee is formed, women are sidelined. Men suspect our capacity to lead, speak up in public, and fulfill our responsibilities. I feel women can perform better if given a chance. However, these women are mostly not given chance even though they aspire to hold leadership position. Traditional system like the Badgar, an informal institution which is practiced in western part of Nepal, where only men hold leadership or chairperson position, obstruct the women to hold such responsibility. In one case, the Water User Association has been led by the same man for over 40 years after his father transferred the position to him. This automatic capture of leadership have excluded women from planning and decision-making process. Recommendation, providing opportunities for women leader in Water Users Association. Female applicants from the local district should be given priority during recruitment process at municipality, irrigation projects, and other concerned bodies working in irrigation and agriculture sector. The perception that women don't have the capacity required for leadership needs to be changed within Water User Association. This could be changed through sharing such success stories of women leading similar groups. For instance, sharing the success story of community forest water users group, and even sharing the stories of like women who have been leading municipality, ward, or who have even been elected in as a representatives in several elections. Some women members have started realizing their self-worth and are aware why they are in the Water Users Association. Women farmers who aspire to hold a leadership position in a Water User Association should get the opportunity to develop the technical and soft skills required for the post. Traditional and systematic barriers can be challenged through awareness, social behavioral change, education, and updating legal system. Key message. The view and need of women and marginalized farmers are often overlooked in male-dominated policies and program design, including Water User Association at local level or other water-related bodies at national level. Until and unless women from diverse groups with diverse background hold leadership position in these bodies in equal number, women-favored policies, program, and technologies is less likely to be made. As a result, women will continue to be left behind despite their contributions, 60 to 80% in food production and irrigation. This may discourage women farmers to be engaged in food production, and this may also disrupt the food security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanju. And I think it's quite an important message, aligning with the theme of World Food Day. Water is life, water is food, and extending that to think, leave no one behind. And women in particular are an important marginalized group that we should always consider and prioritize, especially in irrigation, from a livelihood and food security perspective. So thanks for that presentation. We'll move now to our third presentation that comes from Upali, from EMI again. And just to give a short introduction, Upali received his PhD in statistics from the University of Illinois, Urbana in the USA. He has over 30 years of working experience as a researcher and a project leader in water resources analysis and management at the International Water Management Institute, and 10 years of teaching experience as a lecturer at various universities. His research focuses on various issues of water management, ranging from water accounting and water productivity estimation, food and water supply and demand assessments and projections, and poverty mapping using small area estimation. And today, Upali is going to be sharing with us some of his research around developing an atlas for water productivity for the Ganges, which is part of our NEXUS Gains project. Upali, over to you.
Thank you, Tapasa. These are some of the research that we have been conducting over a long time, and what we thought was to put them in a kind of a dashboard or platform where people can use it to see, to understand how they can use them to address the nexus. So productivity atlas for policy and decision support is yeah. So what is the outline? What we want to show why this water productivity atlas is, and what does it contain, and how can it be used to basically address the nexus. And then if time permits, we'll have a small demonstration at the end. So why this water productivity atlas? We know in Ganges as well as in anywhere else, we are talking about this water, food, energy, environmental nexus. And especially in the Ganges, there are areas where large, high increased crop production, but at the expense of groundwater depletion and energy use, high energy use. And at the same time, there are areas where there are low crop production and low nutritional supply, because of inadequate energy supply and groundwater use. So how do we understand all these things with the available data? So what is this water productivity atlas? It is basically a platform, interactive web platform developed using our Shiny web framework. And it shows basically the spatial and temporal variations of water productivity and water footprint indicators to understand the current gaps and potential increase in different areas. And also it can compare water productivity and footprint indicators across locations and also between crops to see what crops to basically can substitute in terms of the water depletion, and then identify locations where the nexus is severe. And with that, we want to develop scenarios to see how we can reduce the nexus. So this is the landing page for the atlas, and it has basically three components, main components: trends, comparisons, and scenarios. And trends, you see trends, spatial as well as temporal trends of different spatial units. And then comparison is basically comparing across different spatial units as well as crops. And in scenarios, it's not developed yet. We will be developing how best we can develop scenarios to reduce the nexus. So what are the water productivity indicators we have included? We have included several. One is, of course, we know physical water productivity. Many people know about it. That is the production per cubic meter of consumptive water use, unit consumptive water use. And then economic water productivity. That is the value of crop produced per cubic meter of consumptive water use. And then we have added three more indicators. Nutritional water productivity. It deals with basically calories, energy, and then protein and fat supply per cubic meter of water use. As well as we basically show the water footprints, that is blue, green, and total water footprints. So what you see is basically some of the maps that we have generated. And of course, one is the nexus. Nexus, it shows how what are the current nexus in terms of some indicators. This shows what the options you have in the atlas. It basically can generate, even though it is for Ganges, we have developed the whole thing, the atlas for the whole of India. And it basically captures the variation across 28 major states and 8 union territories. And also it includes 596 districts. Basically, there are more, but we want to keep it at 96 to cover all time period from 1990 to 99 to 2020. And it includes 32 crops and 3 cropping systems, basically rice, wheat, rice, and maize, wheat. And we can include more. And then indicators, water productivity and water footprint indicators. This is where you'll see it later in the demonstration. This is where you can select different units of analysis, primary units, secondary units, tertiary units, or indicators, any production system, or any within that, any crop, and then the time period for the analysis. So total consumptive water use is basically the crop water, the usual crop water requirement, crop coefficient times this sum of potential evapotranspiration in crop growth periods. And then in rain-fed area, this is basically the effective rainfall. And irrigated areas is the sum of effective rainfall and consumptive water use from irrigation supply. So this is what you see in one the trends component. This one indicator, physical water productivity across districts in India, and in this one, this is spatial variation, and there are three figures here. One looking at a statistical analysis of means, median, and quartiles, and then the trends of PWP, that is physical water productivity and yield, one of the major indicators, with major factors driving so far the physical water productivity, and then the area and consumptive water use. How these factors basically influence in the water productivity indicators. And that also brings us to the variation across river basins. They're more or less same information, and we can capture it for sub-river basins like Ganges, and within Ganges there are about 18 sub-river basins where you can look at crop water productivity and then look at the water productivity and then develop some scenarios. This is the physical water productivity of cereal crops for the Ganges, and you can see some major production areas in the northwest areas, and these are basically the high water groundwater depletion areas as well as energy use areas. On the other hand, eastern areas are basically low water productivity areas, but where they don't have access to enough electricity for pumping, even though groundwater is abundant. So in the NEXUS component, what we want to develop is basically develop scenarios to understand when you increase physical water productivity, how to reduce the NEXUS, or how to address the NEXUS in different units, whether it is increasing physical water productivity or whatever the actions we take, and how it will basically address the groundwater depletion in some areas. And it can be increasing with supplementary irrigation in some cases. Of course, it will increase, as Bruce said, the consumptive water use, but still there are potential in some areas to increase PWP and then also the benefits. And then increasing EWP, that is economic water productivity with changing cropping patterns, that has the potential to reduce consumptive water use through reduction of water intensive crop areas, and then of course shifting cropping patterns. So what we'll have a very small demonstration prepared by Madhusha Perera. She has basically did this programming for the water atlas.
This is a demonstration of the water productivity atlas. There are 4 main pages: home, trend, comparison, and scenarios. Home page gives you a brief description of each of the other pages. Let's move on to the trend page. On the trend component, you will find 2 panels, the sidebar panel and the main panel. The sidebar panel contains selection options, and the main panel shows the spatial and temporal variation of productivity indicators. Let me go through the selection options. First, select the primary unit of analysis. It can be either administrative unit or the river basin level. The administrative allows to visualize the data for all country or a particular state. Furthermore, the user can visualize district-wise or state-wise variation across the country. These options are available under the tertiary unit of analysis. User can also visualize the river basin or sub-river basin level variation across the country. Then the primary and secondary units of analysis should be selected accordingly. Moreover, the user can choose an indicator, crop, and a suitable year for the visualization. The trend panel allows to compare the variation of an indicator for 2 years. Suppose the user wants to compare the physical water productivity of cereal variation in river basin level for 2020. So once you click the update button, then you will get these charts. So this is how it shows in the main panel. This is a brief introduction to the trend page, and many other options are available. Let's move on to the comparison page. The layout of the comparison page is more or less similar to the trend page. This page allows the user to compare an indicator across units and crops. In this example, the user compared the changes of wheat and maize physical water productivity in Bihar. The next page is about the scenarios, and currently we are developing its content. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That completes the presentation.
Thank you very much, Upali, for that interesting
The
presentation.
demonstration of the water.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much for that. We'll now move into the next stage, and I would like to welcome our two panelists, Professor Sue Walker from the Agricultural Research Council in South Africa. Sue is a principal researcher at the ARC and also Professor Emeritus at the University of the Free State. And like many of our speakers today, she has more than 30 years of experience working on land, water, and soil. And she has experience that straddles Africa, Asia, looking at South Asia and Central Asia. So she's joining us today as a panelist. We also have Professor Ragab, who is the current ICID president. And I'm sure Ragab needs no introduction. Those of us who are into irrigation and water management have grown up around Ragab's name. So it is also an honor to have you here joining us today and giving us your reflections. So briefly, I'm going to ask each one of you to provide us some brief reflections on the presentations that have been given today. And I will start with Professor Sue Walker. Can you give us some brief reflections, please?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whichever part of the country or the world you are. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me. It's been an interesting session hearing the three speakers. And so maybe I will start with Upali at the end, because I really like his tool, and I think it's can really help the people who are planning for the irrigation in India. So I'm not sure how much irrigation is in each part of those districts in India, but it's impressive to have been able to cover all 18 river basins, and also to have 32 crops. We always know that there's much crop diversity in India, so it's good that you could include that many crops. One of the things that I want to compliment you about is I see that in that one drop-down box, you can either do administrative zones, or you can do the catchments or the river basins. And particularly when we were doing our WEF Nexus analysis in South Africa, that was one of the sort of uphill battles we had, because some of our information was at the administrative level and some of it was at the catchment level. And so it was often difficult to be able to do the calculations in each one of the same places. And then I want to come to Bruce, and thank you, Bruce. It was good to be able to see all of your calculations and explanations, although maybe it was a bit too quick for me to catch on to everything that you were talking about, but really trying to look at those trade-offs and see who's benefiting what. And I think that can be very useful, and probably we have to take a bit more time to study it in detail. And then lastly, I want to come to Sanju, and thank you, Sanju, for your presentation all about the gender dynamics, and it's very interesting to see that in those irrigation schemes in Nepal, that the women are not given the opportunities to be in leadership roles. So I just wondered, it seems very similar to us in Africa. Many of our women in irrigation schemes also don't really have that responsibility. And sometimes in South Africa or in Southern Africa, it is linked to what kind of crops are being grown. So if it is the food security main staple crops, then the women are allowed to take responsibility for it or make the decisions. But when it's the irrigation crops that are being sold for cash, so cash crops that are going to the market, even if it's a local market, then many times those decisions are made by the men. So it was very important to see that you've highlighted some recommendations, and so I trust that there will be some capacity building for the women in those irrigation schemes. Thank you, and back to you, Tafadzwa.
Thanks very much, Prof. Su, for the reflections. I'll move on now to Professor Ragab to also share his reflections.
Thank you, Tafadzwa, and thank you, the organizers, for inviting me to this webinar. And I thank the excellent three speakers of today. I should admit, really, every time I listen to some sort of a webinar, I learn a lot. And today, really, no exception. I did learn really from the speakers. I start with my good old friend, Bruce. As usual, excellent presentation with a new information always. He defined the irrigation efficiency and also how to calculate it. At the same time, the association irrigation efficiency with the water productivity, the energy and the emission, and the allocation and equitable distribution of water. And also he referred to the efficiency in terms of depletion and also in terms of withdrawal in its calculation, and the scale actually for the IE or irrigation efficiency that we calculate or estimate. He also mentioned raising the irrigation efficiency comes with issues. And for example, the drip irrigation, it's an efficient system, but it might not be good enough for the small holding areas and poor farmers. And also it mentioned that sometimes that water accounting framework is needed, so to know where the flows are, they come and they go where from, and how can we make a good use of water that can be recoverable. And also he mentioned how we deal with the irrigation efficiency across the scales from the field to the basin, and the water flows and the saving. Also, how can we do that? And he ended by mentioning that governing irrigation efficiency needs comprehensive approaches across the different scales. So that's really quite comprehensive coverage of the irrigation efficiency. Dr. Sanju, she mentioned, of course, that women produce 60 to 80% of the food globally, as well, maybe developing countries. And also women, they face barriers to be at the decision-making levels, and as much as men, and they are not really stakeholders. They have no access to loans, machineries, and also they don't really reach up to the level of the management board. And when women are included in meetings, sometimes the decisions are different when all the attendants are men. And some people, they say actually they get a better decision when women are in that decision meeting. We need, in general, we had a webinar in ICID about the gender issue, and also empowering women in agricultural water management. And we came to the same conclusion that we really need to break these barriers by raising awareness and by education and improving social behavior. And also we have to come to the laws and rules that should allow women to go as up as they can be, and to be members of management boards and also water user associations. The last presentation by Dr. Upali, Water Productivity Atlas, it's really very nice to see that interactive tool, and also to look at the spatial and the temporal changes in water productivity, and to look at the different areas where they have different water productivity, and to understand why one area has got more water productivity than the others, and maybe we take a lesson from that area and feed that information to a lower water productivity areas, and also it can show us gaps, and it can also give us an idea what sort of crops we should use in certain areas to improve the water productivity. And we also looked at in his presentation at the physical water productivity, the economic water productivity, and nutritional water productivity. And the beauty also of that atlas is that you can run it with scenarios, and it can be hypothetical scenarios, and that would lead eventually to a best way to improve water productivity. And these are the three excellent presentations of today. And as I said, that I did learn really something new today, and I thank all the speakers.
Thank you very much, Ragab, for those excellent reflections. Very thorough indeed. So we've got a few minutes left, and I will now spend some time to go through the Q&A and ask some of our speakers to respond to questions that have been posted. I still encourage our participants to post questions in the Q&A. Even if we are not able to respond to them now, we will make sure that we follow up to provide answers to all questions posted. So don't hesitate to post your question. To Sanju, there's a question directed at you. It says, could you share how the National Federation of Irrigation Water Users Association in Nepal is engaged in this process?
Thank you, Tafabja. National Federation of Irrigation Water User Association should be actually promoting the participatory irrigation development process, and should also be empowering water users group and association. However, in this study area, we could not see their their massive engagement. So I am not so sure how they have been engaging in that area. But during my interaction with the farmers, I could not sense that there is massive engagement from their side in promoting participatory irrigation development approach and encouraging water users group. Yeah, that is what I found there.
Okay, thank you. I will pose the next question to Upali. I see there are not many questions directed at you on the platform, but I'll pose a question to you to say, how do you see the atlas in terms of its utility and the sort of decisions that it can inform at the different scales? Can you comment on that?
Yes, I think, obviously at the administrative scale, many decisions are taken. And at that level, there's a direct link from the atlas to develop scenarios. Right now, it gives only information, but once the scenario development tool is there, then that can be basically good base for people to understand how water productivity can be linked to different nexus and how to reduce the nexus. And water at the river basin level, obviously you can look at water supply and demand, how the not demand, water supply and use, what amount of water being used by different crops and by all crops. So that's basically looking at water scarcity aspects of different river basins. So that can be good information for the managers. I would say.
Thank you very much, Upali. And then I'll pose one final question to Bruce. I liked your presentation, Bruce, and you spoke about paper versus real savings. We often refer to them as real versus apparent savings, and you also spoke about the reallocation of those savings, whether they are actually allocated to other different uses outside of agriculture. In your experience, what has been the general trend in terms of what happens often when there are improvements in irrigation efficiencies? And how do you think we can move towards, beyond the calculations and everything, a more equitable allocation system?
So, I'm unmuted, aren't I? That's a great question, to Francois. I mean, I several ways of answering this. One is that I don't think there's enough research on this topic. So we're being guided at the moment by somewhat hypothetical papers and models, and I'm guilty of that as well. And I think, Brian Burns, I think, also asked the same question, which is, where is the track record of research in this field? And I don't think it's robust enough. There's quite a lot of social research and quantitative modeling, but there's not enough empirical research of where that water goes. So I think savings are made, but they're often made at the field scale, and therefore they're translated into either other farmers or the same farmer able to increase his or her irrigation area, or to change to a different crop, or to double crop. And so that's generally what's happening. But of course, it's very wrapped up in other infrastructures, such as storage, changing the soil structure within the field to harvest more rain, using wastewater, so on and so forth. So it's a very complex picture, but it's a great question.
Thank you very much, Bruce, for that answer. We've come to the end.
Can I comment?
Come again, Ragab?
Yeah, can I just comment on water saving at business?
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, there was a concept a while ago that there is no need to care much about improving the irrigation efficiency, because what's really lost upstreams will be gained downstreams. And that has been a concept, and still some organizations actually still believe in that. And I have been a month ago listening to a presenter also trying to convince everyone that don't worry about irrigation efficiency, because what's lost upstream will be gained downstream. My work in a recent project in India, in the Kovri Basin, we actually tried to see how the subsurface flow goes from upstream to downstream. And we had a pumping test in Kovri Basin. And we have been looking at the groundwater level 50 meters away from the borehole. When we were conducting the pumping test, there was no change in the groundwater level 50 meters away. And the reason that, because we have been working together with the British Geological Survey as a part of the project, they discovered actually the geological structure and layering changes from the upstream to downstream with significant wide fractures. So basically, the water doesn't really, what's lost upstream, it doesn't really reach the downstream part. And for that reason, sometimes that we've got to be careful when they say, don't worry about the irrigation efficiency, because what's lost upstream would be gained downstream. That's one example. Other example I faced in other parts in Africa, in Niger, for example, as a very dry region. And in order to generate a subsurface flow, you have to create saturated conditions. And in arid regions and semi-arid region, this can take ages before really you saturate the subsurface layers. So in order really to create subsurface flow and to move from A to B, then you need a huge amount of water to saturate these layers. So that concept really of don't worry about irrigation water efficiency and so on, it doesn't really apply to arid region. At the same time, also even in wet regions, that the geological structure can play an important role and actually can be against that concept. So just one comment on the paper saving idea or concept or the phrase of paper saving, that we're going to be careful with that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ragab, for weighing in with those additional comments and reflections and the very practical examples from your experiences. We appreciate that. So with those comments, we have come to the end of our NEXUS Gains talk for today. Apologies, we've gone over time slightly by a few minutes, but I think we really needed to go through all the talks. I think in terms of the centrality of water, in terms of water for food and water for life, the talks that we had today really straddled important areas around the technical aspects of managing water, which is what Bruce spoke to, as well as, linking to the administrative or the governance of managing water. And we had then from Sanju mentioning on the social aspects, which is the gender and social inclusion aspects related to water and water for food. And then we had Upali coming in, really giving us the scalar effect in terms of how do we look at it from different scales, different jurisdictional boundaries, administrative and catchment, and also looking at the multi-dimensionality of water productivity, looking at it from physical, economic, and nutritional water productivity. And I think it is clear from the three presentations and the reflections that we've received that the cross-cutting nature of water and its centrality creates complexity in terms of how do we manage the resource, not just for agriculture and irrigation, but also for the environment and ecosystems, and also for people and for health. And it becomes important now that when we handle complexity, we come up with approaches that understand the trade-offs in the system so that we do not transfer problems from one area to another or from one sector to another, but also approaches that are transformative in that they bring about the desired change in trajectory from the status quo to the desired, which is the sustainability that we are looking at. In that regard, NEXUS approaches such as the water, energy, food, environment nexus become critical to informing our understanding. They become a critical lens to help us understand trade-offs and synergies. They become a critical approach to reshaping and restructuring the nature of partnerships, promoting inclusion, as well as greater equity in agricultural water management. So with those last words, I thank everyone for being here, and I bring this talk to an end. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day further.